to share your screen also.
We are the table group from Glenelg has a hunch. My name is David Horvath. I'm Joel Mel.
I'm Sam Shaw.
This is our topic background. The main element of our topic background is our lunar habitats. These are inflatable or rigid habitats where the astronauts can reside while completing most of their missions. On the moon, the gravity is 1/6 that of Earth, so this is another concern we have to take into account. And our project is a lunar table, and the materials in the table will be transported to and from the habitat by spacecraft.
So tables are important to have on the lunar habitat because can be used for many different purposes. Some of the different uses are scientific experiments, entertainment, eating, video conferencing and working, and construction or building of other items. Having a table on the lunar habitat will make all of these tasks much easier. For example, scientific experiments, the astronauts could put their materials and tools on the table. And for video conferencing, the astronauts could put their laptop on the table while they're talking to different scientists and engineers back on Earth.
So to understand more about our problem about the lunar tables, we had a survey that collected a bunch of responses. And one of the questions that we asked was how people most commonly use tables in their daily life. And we found out that eating and working were the most common uses, while cooking and entertainment were second most common. And this can help us in understanding what astronauts might potentially be using these tables for and design our table prototypes around this criteria.
I love that you do these surveys, guys. When you talk, could you kind of speak right? I hear the person in the middle the best, but the other two is kind of blurred. So move your computer when each of you talk, or move towards the middle. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. Another question that we asked was whether people have struggled with assembling a table before. And the most common issue was that there are too many pieces. So this can be pretty important when we're designing the table. So when astronauts are assembling or using the table, they can be sure to make sure the design is not too complex for them to use.
So the sound is worse now. Sorry. Just make sure you talk right into the computer.
This is our problem statement.
No.
Habitats will be a vital component to the success of future NASA missions. According to the California Institute of Technology.
It's still not good.
Okay.
Just
Bring it right up to the person.
Lunar habitats will be a vital
That's
component
good.
to the success of future NASA missions. According to the California Institute of Technology, tables provide necessary work and storage space for the astronauts residing in the habitats. Currently, it costs roughly $10,000 to send a pound of payload into orbit. And with the relative importance of scientific instruments in comparison to a table, it becomes important for the table to have a high carrying ability to a low weight ratio, with a target weight bearing capacity of 100 pounds under Earth's gravity, which would be about 600 pounds under the moon's gravity. In addition, because flames are presented differently in space, there's an increase in fire spreadability. Further, securing the table to the habitat will minimize the effect of microgravity. Lunar tables are essential for both astronauts and scientists to accomplish tasks and live with a wide array of uses provided.
Okay. Some lunar-based solutions that we've examined were the galley table, which was actually a previous NASA HUNCH project. And we examined and understood that it was used on the International Space Station for astronauts to be able to eat and as well as work on. Another previous NASA table was the Space Station wardrobe table. And this was a compactable table that actually folded out from a closet that was located on the space station.
Those were our lunar-based solutions, but some of our Earth-based solutions have been a basic camping table, which is a normal table that can function and can also compress and collapse into a smaller form factor for storage and transportation. Our second earth-based solution was a seated camping table, which provides 4 seats, which can be used for seating while working at the table or for storage for other purposes. And while this is compressed, it takes up minimal storage for transportation.
So some parameters that we've examined and are planning to use are the table surface sizing. From the NASA HUNCH website, we noted that there is a maximum of 20 inches by 20 inches. Another parameter would be package sizing. So we've decided that most likely the table will be transported through a stowage locker. So using the stowage locker sizing, which is around 15 by 20 by 20, will be a notable parameter. The table should be able to hold at least 100 pounds on Earth, and as well as be sturdy and not loosen or falling apart, which means that it cannot have any loose pieces or have pieces that can easily disconnect or break as well.
The cost should be under $100 so that many tables can be made for a relatively cheap price. The table should be non-flammable because fire is much more of a hazard in space than it is on Earth. The weight should be less than 25 pounds because the heavier the table is, the more expensive it will be to transport into space. The load bearing should be 100 pounds on Earth, which is about 600 pounds on the moon. And that's more than enough for anything the astronauts would like to put on the table. The table should be easy to assemble in 3 to 5 minutes. This means it should be relatively simple with not a lot of different pieces. The table should be durable enough to last 6 months in standard use on the lunar habitat. And it should be easy to clean with wet wipes due to the limited amount of water on the lunar habitat and in space. The table should be collapsible so it can fit in small spaces while it's not in use, and so it can easily be transported to the lunar habitat.
So looking at some previous designs, we had a few criteria that we've examined these tables by and evaluated them by. And we decided that the criteria to be used were usability, durability, adjustability, lightweight, weight supportability, and flammability. Usability and durability were some of the more higher rated criteria because these ones will more directly affect the astronauts while they're using the tables on the lunar habitat. So we evaluated some potential solutions with portable tray table as well as modular work table being the highest rated because they were the best at usability and durability. So their function was to be used by the astronauts easily. And they were also made of durable materials and durable design, which is not easily to break apart or bend under pressure.
Thank you for listening to our presentation. Any questions?
Wow, you did a great job on that presentation, guys. Very professional, already experts in presenting your ideas. And thank you for talking. We really could hear you really well. I'm going to let our reviewers talk first. Whoever wants to, Gene or Glenn.
Go ahead, Glenn.
Overall, I really like what you had to say. Could you go back to your second slide? I'm sorry. Oh, did you guys draw that? Because that looks really cool. I don't think I've seen that somewhere else before.
This was an image I found online. We did not draw it.
Wow.
Okay, it's a good representation. I hadn't seen that one before, so I thought that was kind of cool. Next slide, please. Keep going. Gosh, did I miss something? Next slide. I'm missing something. Go back up. There was a slide where you were talking about, keep going, keep going. Huh. Some of your background statements were a little bit confusing to me. There was a slide that had about a paragraph or so, and I was a little bit confused at how you had done some of the wording. Here we go. This is it. Okay, so for example, this is a small correction. So to send stuff to orbit is, I think you're right, is somewhere around about $10,000, but we got to send this all the way to the moon, and that's about $1.2 million per pound. Okay. The other one that, and this is my fault, so I misunderstood. With a target weight bearing capability of 100 pounds under Earth's gravity. Okay, I misunderstood how I heard that, and so I think that you stated it just fine. I just misread it or misheard you. Okay, excellent job, guys. Let me think a little bit more. Keep going. Gene, you have any comments?
I thought this was an excellent way to end your research stage. You cite your sources. You came up with the key points. I loved your poll, how you went through that. In fact, as I'm listening to this, it did something for me that is not necessarily for you and your projects, but it gave me another idea for a future project, which I'll talk to Glenn about afterwards. Based on what you guys said.
Good job.
So that's always a good thing. Very well done. I really like how well you did. You presented your research. Not that, I don't know how you did your research, but you presented it well. So very good.
Yeah, and that's why I invited both of you, because this is like their research stage that they are working on right now. And I thought that, Gene, you might want to use some of this information for a video later on.
Oh, I would definitely use parts of this flow. So definitely keep this, the video of this.
Yeah.
For any future research videos to show what we kind of want. Like, for example, I'll just even point to this page right here. For a PowerPoint page, there's probably too much, but this is a presentation about research. And for that, this hits the nail on the head. You point out the specific facts and you cite your sources. And there are 3 sources in here. So this is a very good page for data. In a normal presentation, you'd have this as an extra. But this for a research presentation, this is awesome. Very well done.
It is good. Okay.
Okay.
Hey guys, could you go down to where you were talking about the different options you were considering? There you go. Okay, tell me a little bit about how you did your rating.
So for our rating, we had like a weighted rating for the different criteria that we've examined, and we were deciding which ones were more important. And then the weighted rating was multiplied by the weight, I guess, was multiplied by the rating that we gave each individual table just independently. And then through the rate by multiplying the the weight by the rating, and then adding that the weighted ratings together, we were able to arrive at the total. So.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So one thing, sorry, but this is one of my pet peeves, is you need to put what number is the better rating. So if your rating is from 1 to 10, you need to put 8 is the best rating. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You just have to have that key. Go ahead, Glenn. I'm sorry.
No, and that's fine. But it's just a way for you to be able to kind of, you're trying to put a quantitative number as to why you like this for usability, durability, adjustability. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and I think that's good. And I like that you've got a lot of different options here. Wardrobe table, steel welding. Go to the next slide.
I believe that was the.
Yeah.
Oh, that was the last one. Go up one. I'm sorry. Limited use of water and space. I like all of the specifications that you're putting into here. I think that was really smart. So with this in mind, what kind of things what are you thinking is your next step?
So we're thinking about developing a solution. Right now we're drawing sketches And then after we come up with a few good sketch designs, then we'll probably make a 3D model in CAD.
Okay, that sounds great. And I didn't know if you guys had already started playing with some things in terms of, I don't know, maybe wood or inflatable or anything like that.
So I have, can you go up one slide to your first points? Okay, that number one, cost under $100. That, what Glenn just told you, that it cost $1.2 million to send it up to the space station. Any cost of your table becomes negligible to the cost of it being sent up there. So I would not put that you won a cost of under $100. I think the cost is irrelevant when you're dealing with $1.2 billion just to send it. So I would definitely, if I was going to mention cost, I would say irrelevant because of $1.2 million. If that makes sense to you guys. Glenn, what do you think about flammability?
Obviously it's important. We don't want it. Let's see. Let me say this right a little bit better. So if these are things for the flight unit, obviously flammability is very important. But if it is something for what you guys are producing, I'm not as worried about it at the moment. It's something that you keep. So as you're developing your prototype, I'm not so worried about flammability. But as you are designing, be thinking about the materials that we would use when we send it to the moon, that the materials that we choose for the final product would be low flammability. Does that make sense? And I think that's what you were going after there. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. But if I had to list these specifications, I wouldn't put flammability up there at the top. I would put weight, because it costs $1.2 million to send up there. I would put weight. I also would put easy to assemble. And you mentioned that since it was easy, you didn't have a lot of little parts loose, that would be right up there also, you know. And I would put compact. And you talk about that really well. I love that you even thought over that it probably is going to go up into a single stowage locker. That was awesome research. I mean, your research level was outstanding.
Good thinking.
Yeah, you really have hit it. The one other question I have for maybe this is a Gene question, because he flew on the zero gravity plane in lunar parabolas.
Just rub that into Glenn, Flo. Keep going.
Right. Would on the moon, would anything just stay on the table if we have a table with, you know, let's say food? And I loved your survey too, guys. That what is the table going to be used for? So let's say food. Would the food just stay on the table?
That's actually, that was going to be my final thing I was going to bring up, because Glenn and I have been having a conversation about this. Weight on the moon is not going to be a problem in the way a lot of people think it is. And that is, it's going to be the inertia that's going to have a problem. For example, on this, I'd say if you want your table on Earth to be under 25 pounds, I would say you probably want it even lower than that for whatever it's going to be on the moon. But on the moon, whatever it is, if it's 25 pounds, 1/6 of that is what, 4 pounds? Mm-hmm. That weight is not going to be a thing. They'll be able to move it around. But if you're sitting at a table, how many times have you gone to get up from a table and you need it? If you hit it with your knee or something like that, right? You do that on the moon, the table is going to have inertia. You're going to hit it. You're going to get the same bruising on yourself when you hit it with your knee. But what's going to happen is its inertia, it only weighs 1/6 that weight, right? So it's going to move upward and everything on that table is going to go flying off.
Mhm.
Okay, it's going to be like having a very lightweight table, unless you consider mounting it or versions of that. But also having ways of attaching things to the table might be a good way to go too. So it's 0G is a lot of the problems are not what you originally think they're going to be.
Mhm. And actually, that brings up something. I was in Boston, just walking around to looking at store windows, and I saw a store called Strategic Spaces. Write this down: Strategic Spaces. And when I looked in, there was a table connected to the wall, so it only had 2 legs. And the other part of the table was connected to the wall. And that would solve your inertia problem if you had it connected to something. And that's what when I saw that table, I said, could we connect a table to C-Track? I don't know how much C-Track, this is for Glenn, how much C-Track will be used in habitats, but that would save 2 legs of the table, making it lighter, and it would solve that inertia problem.
Right. And connecting it to the inflatable walls could have some value, but of course there's some danger with that, right?
Yeah.
Just because if we don't want to rip our walls.
Yeah. It would have to have C-Track or something on the walls.
Right. And so, yeah, there's a lot
connect
of complications there, but these are all things that we should be considering.
Yeah.
Okay.
All the furniture in the window is very interesting. Even the chairs were really interesting. So I can't stop thinking about the Hunch projects, no matter where I am.
That's right.
Yeah, me too.
Same here.
Okay. How are we doing with time? Are
Okay.
you okay?
I think so. Do you have any questions, team?
One question I have is, so
You got
Rotate
to
your,
talk.
there you go.
Should we be concerned about, or should we take note of how the table is going to be transported to the lunar habitat? So the constraints of being in 0G or constraints of being in the spacecraft, will that be something we should focus on as well?
So having it, the idea is that we want to ship it in as small of a space as we can. And then once we get it onto the moon and we assemble it, we're trying to make it reasonably fast to set up, right? And that doesn't mean that it's 30 seconds to set it up, but if it takes several minutes to set it up or use one or two tools, that's also okay. But in terms of shipping, yeah, getting it as small as possible is a good idea.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
So small as possible, light as possible, and simple as possible. My 3 rules, right?
Any other thoughts, guys?
No, thanks so much for listening to our presentation.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Now, I'm not quite sure how I got that picture, but that is the rock garden where they test out the rock garden at Jet Propulsion Lab in California, where they test out their rovers.
Oh, wow.
I took that picture a long time ago, and I'm not sure why it showed up there, but that's awfully cool.
Hey, that's good for the kids working on the wheels.
Yes, and yeah, that's one of the rovers, but that's their test rover behind me there.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Hi, how are you?
How are you doing?
Hi, Dr. Gold. How are you?
Good. It's good to see you.
Nice to see you again, too. We're having, okay, sorry. We had a little trouble with our presentation for a second there. We're just trying to get it up.
Is it working?
I think so.
Yes, it is.
Can you all see that?
Yep. Collapsible mirror,
Perfect.
Brady and Alex.
Yes, so, hi, how are you? I'm Grady Cronkite,
And I'm Alex Kurtilla.
and we're here to talk to you about collapsible mirrors. So a problem statement is that NASA expects to launch the Artemis 3 rocket in 2024 and establish a human presence on the moon. While on the moon, astronauts will be exposed to a harmful level of radiation and will need to seek shelter. To address this issue, NASA wants to design a rover that will be able to collect regolith and mix it with melted plastic in order to create bricks that can be used for shelter construction. Polyethylene plastic melts at between 125 and 132 degrees Celsius, and that will allow them to melt down the plastic and mix with the regolith. These bricks will block significant amounts of radiation and will let through approximately 27 milligrays per year of radiation. A milligray is a measurement of the amount of radiation absorbed by a person measured in joules per kilogram. And for reference, 50 milligrays is considered to be like the limit for the annual exposure someone should receive, and 500 milligrays is the threshold for radiation sickness.
So for some topic background, while that lunar rover is going around there, it's going to go through different production cycles of 14 Earth days long. So that lunar day is 28. After that was daylight, so 14. And during those daylight hours, the moon is exposed to 60 milligrays per hour of radiation, which is 200 times what we're exposed to here on Earth. That was very harmful to astronauts who are still living.
Yeah, and to protect the astronauts from that, we can make regolith bricks that can block radiation. Regolith melts down at around 1,100 degrees Celsius, and polyethylene plastic melts at around 120 degrees Celsius. And once the polyethylene is melted down, it can be mixed with the regolith, and the regolith doesn't need to be completely melted, but it does need to get hot enough to become easier to mix.
So on that rover is that collapsible mirror. So the three most common types of mirrors are first the focus balance reflector. And the advantages of that is the top image. And the advantages of that are it's got a centered weight and it's very maneuverable due to that center weight and centered focal point.
Yeah, and another one is a Scheffler reflector, which is Scheffler reflectors are usually part of arrays. So many small mirrors, all part of a single array of mirrors pointing at a single focal point, which is usually a solar tower in the middle that absorbs all the light that's reflected.
Yeah, and that's usually used in large scale production instances. So the third one is the off-axis reflector, and the most common application of that is a satellite dish. So the focal point of that dish is outside of that mirror, and so it doesn't block any of the incoming radiation.
Yeah, and for our research for this, we found that sending only 1 pound of material up to the moon costs around $101.2 million, which is obviously very expensive. So just sending tons of concrete up to the moon wouldn't work for building structures that could withstand radiation. So it would be more effective to make the materials on the moon, such as the regolith bricks. It's already been proven that polyethylene can be mixed with regolith to create bricks, and those bricks that were made can block around 27 milligrays of radiation per year.
So aside from the lunar application, we also proposed a more earthly application, which would be the same process, just done with earth materials. And the purpose of that would be to recycle plastic in a new way. Recycling today is inefficient, it's complicated, it's expensive, and it releases some toxic fumes, which are very unhealthy. And what we propose is that we can use this in sort of underserved areas that have limited access to proper construction materials.
So we conducted a survey to see what people know about mirrors, if they're interested in them, and we asked 3 main questions. Did you know that mirrors can be used to generate heat? Have you ever used mirrors to generate heat? And would you consider using mirrors in the future to generate heat? As you can see, we have pie graphs, and the blue is yes, and the red is no. The results of those questions were that around 85% of people knew that mirrors can be used to produce heat. Around 81% of people knew that mirrors or were interested in using mirrors to create heat, but only around 24% of people have actually used mirrors to generate heat.
What we can gather from that data is that there is a common understanding already of applications of mirrors in heat generation. But more specifically, the biggest takeaway is that when we design our product, simplicity and user friendliness are going to be very important. and definitely things to consider.
So when researching past and present solutions, we came across three main designs. There is dish designs, trough designs, and Scheffler designs.
So throughout all of those three designs, we found the three biggest things that each of these designs are missing, which is maneuverability. Most designs on Earth are large arrays and don't really have to move too much to get that solar energy. Collapsibility, which hasn't been a thing on these earthly applications because it's going to have to be transported to the moon. And shielding. And shielding means how well that dish is protected from debris and dust, because that's going to be very prevalent on the lunar surface.
Yeah, so we have to basically take the old designs and then find a way to make them work on the moon.
And considering those three big points.
Yeah. So we also found different specifications that we'll need to design our mirror around. Our mirror must be able to operate for 14 Earth days straight. That's around 30 or 336 hours at a time.
So the scale model that we built is going to fit inside a 24-inch cube, but the actual model can be as large as we want to meet those energy production levels.
Yeah, and when we're testing our mirror and having it reflect all the light and focus heat, we need to make sure it's safe because we don't want to burn ourselves really when we're operating and testing these very high temperature mirrors.
Yeah. So during the transport of that mirror, it does have to collapse to at least half of its deployed volume. But once it's up there, it shouldn't have to be recollapsed.
And we also want to make sure we're using lightweight and heat resistant materials because when we're sending up to the moon, like we said earlier, it costs about $1.2 million per pound. So if we make it too heavy, it'll be very expensive and not as useful to NASA. And we also need it to be heat resistant so it can stay up there and operate for a long time without having to send up repairs or replacement parts. And we also have a few different sketches here. You can see we have an umbrella shaped mirror there. We also have the U-wing, which is kind of like a trough mirror that'll open up and then close when it collapses.
We have a collapsing dish, which rotates around itself to collapse, so that's a lot more than that half deployed. We have a folding trough, which just folds onto itself very simply.
And then here is our decision matrix. As you can see, we considered a lot of different designs and sketches, and we decided that the best one is the one in, I think that's the dead center there. It had a score of 56, and that was the U-wing. Which, oh, yes, and for our decision matrix, we weighted each different specification on the left side on a scale of 0 to 2, 0 being the least useful and 2 being the most useful. And then we also gave each design a rating on those specifications from 1 to 5, 1 being the worst and 5 being the best.
Awesome.
So that U-wing design that we call it is that trough design mirror. And the key point of that is component 5, which is that bottom reflective surface, reflects energy to the focal point and then down into the collection area. But the component 4, the other reflective surface, will deflect energy straight to point 3. And the point of that is to reduce the load that focal mirror component 2 has to take.
Yeah. And here are references. This is different sources we use for our research. And do you have any questions?
Thank you.
Wow. You guys in college already? That was amazing presentation.
Thank you.
I don't think college kids do a presentation like that. That was awesome. I'll let my reviewers talk first.
Hey, go up to your last slide there. Go up one slide. There we go. Tell me a little bit more about what you think you're going to do with this.
Yeah, so that so as I said earlier, the two different reflection paths reduce that load on that focal point. That was one of the bigger problems that we found in our research, that a lot of these mirrors didn't last because of that focal mirror being very small and handling a lot of heat.
Yeah, so by as you can see, it when light goes from point 1 to point 4, it can then go down to point. And
Yeah.
sorry, what were we saying about the heat?
Yeah, so just that heat longevity, that's what we're trying to get. That's the whole point of this design.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's not as easy to see with this orthometric view right here, but in an isometric view, you'd see like how long it is. So it's a trough mirror. So each of those little, I guess, wings on either side is going to be pretty long.
Yeah, and that trough here is what we're looking at with this guy.
Um,
This middle image, that's
Yeah,
that trough.
similar to that.
Okay, and that's fine. And one of my comments here is just that we're not really looking for like we don't need a perfect image to show up. We're really trying to just focus the heat as much as we can. And so I appreciate how you're doing this. We don't need a perfect parabola, but we do need to make sure that we're getting as much of the heat onto that pipe as possible. And so it might be that you want to change from having flat surfaces there to having a little bit more of a curved surface and still be able to fold it up into a similar fashion. But I like exactly where you're going. I think this is looking very good. Good thinking, team.
Yeah, I think that's a very good.
So the impression I got was that they made that design so that the mirror would last longer because the heat wasn't so concentrated. But are you saying, Glenn, you want the heat concentrated so that you can?
The heat needs to be on the pipe, but it does not need to be on like
The mirror.
like a very fine line across the pipe. So it some of the heat might hit the sides of the pipe, whereas some of the heat might be hitting directly underneath the pipe. And that's perfectly fine. It doesn't need to be on a very fine line along the pipe.
Mm-hmm. So I have a question for kind of Glenn. The rover's only going to be roving during the sunny days, so they don't have to worry about the cold. They only have to worry about the heat. Or does a mirror need to be able to withstand a negative 250 degrees? That's basically my question.
I see what you're at. I don't want it to fall apart while it's on the cold side, but I don't know that there's a lot for us to be worried about there. What are you thinking about?
We could put the rover in the habitat and not worry about the cold, or in a garage when it's cold.
Well, and that's possible, but I don't know that it's something that, I don't know. Gene, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that you're going to want to run this thing as much as you possibly can. So right up to nighttime. So it's going to travel, I would assume, and get to its next point during that downtime. So it'll be out in the dark for quite a while.
She's bringing up something interesting there. I mean, in terms of the battery, there's going to be batteries that we're charging up and allowing to charge down. We don't want them turning into ice bricks. But I think that that's really somebody else's job at the moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
The people who are taking care of the batteries, that'll be a concern. In terms of the mirror itself, I don't see it as being a problem for it, for it getting cold, depending on the materials that you choose, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, whether you're using Mylar or you're using, aluminum, like a thin aluminum or something like that, I don't think that we have problems with those getting down to low temperatures. So in terms of the mirror, I don't think that there's anything for them to worry about. Do you have any other thoughts on that?
I was thinking that with the mirror, you're going to have the one side facing the sun getting pretty hot, because even if it absorbs 1% of the light that hits it, it'll get hot. But on the other side is the dark side, and it will be emitting heat off the backside in just as much that it's receiving, or close to it. You're going to have that negative 200 degrees in the shadow, except for any kind of radiation coming off this device. So that'll be an issue, but I think there's gonna a lot of unknowns there right now.
Yeah, I don't think it's something for this team to worry about right now.
Exactly.
Good.
I am curious about their drawings here. I like what they've done, the different variety in their searches, but right here, this one specifically, are those supposed to be light rays bouncing off those arrows?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is showing like light rays. That one that's above the number 5 is going almost straight up toward that basket in the middle, or toward number 2, but then there's an arrow right next to it. It's like pointing toward number 3. Is that can you explain that a little bit more? Because the drawing is a little bit confusing how you have those arrows.
Yeah, so those outer arrows that reflect onto component 4 are going to go straight, they're going to bounce off and go straight down to 3.
Okay.
The inner ones are going to reflect up off of 5.
Okay.
And that's part of what makes our design more heat resistant, because instead of bouncing from 4 up to 2 and then putting a lot of heat onto that focal mirror, it'll just bounce straight down to where it needs to be.
I see what you're doing. Okay, thank you. But otherwise, I like that fact that you've included where you were thinking of going along with your research in this. Very nicely done.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really like your everything about it, but your matrix, you put in the scale, which was great, and you even had pictures of what we saw pictures of like the flexible throw and all the things you were talking about, so we had some idea of which ones were the best. So that's a lot of work you did. That's
Actually,
really
I wanted to
impressive.
throw out. I'm sorry, Flo. I just wanted to say, I wanted to throw out something just for in general when using these weighted scores and things. Having a key in the bottom explaining why you rated why the weight is what it is and how you came about doing that. Like why is collapsible 2 versus maneuvery 1.5 and things like that. You don't have to tell us here, but having that explanation somewhere in your PowerPoint might help also.
Yeah, that'll be good to consider for the next presentation.
Yeah, and I like that you researched enough to know that those bricks are good insulation for radiation, which I hadn't really even thought about. And now you made me think about, well, if it's good for insulation also to keep the hot or cold inside something or not. Yeah.
Maybe.
So that's really important. And I like that you also applied it to something on Earth, the useful purpose on Earth. That's what I always want to see in your presentation. So you've covered all the bases, which is awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do you have any questions?
No.
Alex or Grady, do you have any questions?
Oh, questions? I guess I could ask just what do you think of our sketches? Like, do you think these are like from professionals, I'd like to know, like, what do you think these sketches are acceptable, or anything we should do differently in the future to make them more up to, I guess, NASA standard or anything like that?
I think that you guys have some very good starting points here. And I think that you're going in a good direction. What do you think your next step is?
I think our next step is to truly extensively evaluate all of our designs, consider our research, and sort of propose a path that we need to go on, and then fully flesh out that design, because these are very simple sketches, obviously. Then we need to determine kind of what direction we want to go and fully flesh that out.
Yeah, and especially with our decision matrix as well, we need to see our #1 design so far, which is the U-wing, and then we can also look at some of the other high-scoring ones and see like what parts of them is really, really good, what parts of them aren't, and we can maybe take good parts of their designs, add them to the best design, and hopefully make the best solution we can.
Sounds good. All right. Good job, guys.
Yep, that's exactly what engineers do. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, we can go get our next group and
Yes, thank you both so much.
Thank you
Great
again.
job.
thank you so much for feedback.
Yeah. Thank you for all your work.
Excellent job, guys. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm trying to.
I say, I think the other group's moving over in place, switching some PowerPoints around now.
Well, your teams have been working hard.
Yeah, they work hard. I mean, they're all starting to realize like November 1st, like these college deadlines and all this is a lot though, because they're all seniors, right? So this is like this is like top stress week this week into like next week right now.
Wow.
Most of them have done their college app side of things too, or at least well underway. So they're doing really good with that this year. All right, I think they're jumping in over there on the other one. And then Dylan's also part of this group. He's at home today, so he's gonna go. There he is.
Hi,
There he goes.
Dylan.
So he's gonna be presenting with them as well.
It's broadcasting from the ISS.
I just want to test it. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes, we do. Thank
All right.
you.
All right. I'll mute myself.
All right, can you guys see and hear the presentation?
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Perfect. I'm Skylar Rill,
I'm Aiden Coleman.
And I'm Dylan Stone.
and we're the Lunar Scooter Wheels group from Glenelg High School, and this is our research and exploration preliminary review. The NASA Artemis program plans to colonize the moon in the near future. In order to pursue this, a means of transportation has revealed itself as a necessity. NASA plans to do this through the creation of a lunar scooter. In this case, 2 wheels will be better than 4 as it allows for a more maneuverable and compact design. Our goal is to create an effective wheel that is lightweight, durable, and capable of high speeds.
To expand on the previous slide, wheels are a key element of lunar exploration and development. Past wheel designs aren't effective for our solution due to their low speed. So the new wheel designs have to be mission specific, and therefore a need for mission specific design process is created.
While helping NASA is beneficial within itself, our product needs an Earth benefit in order to be justified as a problem that needs to be solved. 9% of all car crashes are caused by tire-related failure, and there's an observed 280% increase in tire-related accidents or mishaps in adverse weather conditions. Our own market research revealed that 70% of people have experienced a flat tire, and nearly 60% of people hit a pothole or curb at least once a month. By creating a tire that is non-pneumatic, we could potentially be reducing property damage and loss of life.
So
Awesome.
with that information at hand, our problem can be defined as the NASA Artemis program's plans to go to the moon in order to make new scientific discoveries and find potential benefits. While on the moon, astronauts may need to travel while facing the moon's difficult terrain. So larger 4-wheel systems were designed for this in the past. But NASA still wants a smaller, compact 2-wheel transportation system that astronauts can use in emergency situations while traveling difficult terrain. This device needs to be able to travel at high speeds and for long distances with minimal risk of failure. Looking at past and present designs for lunar vehicles, there's no standard for wheels that fit these criteria. All lunar vehicles in the past and present were either unmanned or the lunar roving vehicle. Past unmanned rovers, such as the Soviet Lunar Cod 1 and 2, the Chinese U-2 1 and 2, and the NASA Mars rovers, operated at speeds under 1 kilometer an hour and had issues with premature tread damage and getting stuck. So while the United States lunar roving vehicle was a manned personal transport vehicle, which moved at much higher speeds, it had issues with durability and weight capacity. So while inspiration can be drawn from these past and present designs, they were built for different purposes or had major design flaws, which make them unacceptable choices for the lunar scooter.
Now, as defined in the problem, past designs aren't really applicable for what we're trying to do, but that doesn't mean inspiration can't be drawn from them.
Lunar Cod 1 and 2 were unmanned Soviet rovers sent to the moon in the early 70s to conduct experiments. These rovers had 8 wheels that were comprised of mesh cages with rigid bike-like spokes.
These 8 wheels came in 4 pairs, these pairs being individually steerable. Each wheel was directly driven with a motor being housed within its hub.
Like the Lunar Cod rovers, U-2 1 and 2 were unmanned teleoperated lunar rovers sent to the moon by China. However, due to their foreign policy, very little is publicly known about these.
So just from observing images of these rovers, we can see that they're six-wheeled, and they appear to have six rigid inner spokes. And according to the BBC, the U2's main operating speed is around 0.2 kilometers per hour.
Next up is the Apollo Lunar Roving Vehicle, or LRV. This rover had 4 wheels and was sent onto the moon on Apollo missions 15, 16, 17 as a means of personal transportation, and had a speed of around 16 kilometers per hour. This rover is the closest in achieving our specifications.
This is due to its purpose and operation speed. LRV being made for human transportation means that ride quality and durability at high speeds were key components in its design process. Now, if we're looking at the wheels themselves, it is made of an aluminum inner hub, a titanium inner frame, a woven metal mesh, and it has a chevron pattern of tread strips around its perimeter with the purpose of increasing thrust.
Moving on to some earthbound iterations of designs, we have the Levy and Me e-scooters, which were 2-wheel recreational scooters with maximum speeds of 18 to 20 miles per hour. And while the wheels for this used a pneumatic tire design, which is not possible for use in space, these designs can still be incorporated into our own due to their size and shape, which are unlike the previously shown lunar wheels.
So to summarize and conclude all that information, we can take away some key elements from the rovers that we looked at and the e-scooters. First and foremost, their hollow and mesh designs are extremely important. These designs greatly reduce weight, which due to the $1.2 million per pound shipping cost to the moon, having the lightest possible wheel is of course extremely beneficial and important. Another upside of the hollow mesh design is it allows regolith and dust particulates to pass in and out of the wheel due to the decreased amount of the wheel actually being in contact with the ground. This means that the wheels themselves, the scooter itself, and the astronaut are less likely to get damaged or harmed by kicked up particulates. Another thing we can look at is the size and shape of the e-scooters. All the other wheels we looked at are relatively wide and square due to the fact that they were made for multi-wheeled vehicles. But the scooters we looked at were specifically scooters, 2 wheels. They were very narrow and rounded, which is better for a 2-wheel device as it has better turn radius, better ride quality on 2 wheels. And then of course, something we can look at is the material selection, as a lot of these rovers actually went to the moon and survived on the moon, meaning that the materials they used are tried and true and we can trust in our own application.
These designs do have their own drawbacks, of course, including the low speed required for most. The lunar roving vehicle in particular was noted for having durability issues, and the e-scooters weren't made for the lunar surface whatsoever.
After looking at past designs, we must define what our design needs to accomplish. These specifications need to be able to travel up to speeds of 15 miles per hour, have a lifespan of 300 miles, while being able to carry around 100 Earth pounds. It's a little goofy, but Dylan is holding our model that shows the dimensions being at max 10 inches in width, 18 inches in diameter, and having 1/2 inch axles.
We see it. Thank you.
Taking the specifications from the previous slide, we created a weighted rating system in order to decide which of the designs would be best used for inspiration. Each specification was weighted differently based on its importance. So for example, performance is weighted much higher than aesthetics. Using this system, we comprised a list of the top 3 designs for inspiration, which were the lunar roving vehicle, Lunicod 2, and Lunicod 1. These are some of our preliminary sketches that we've come up with in order to tackle the design, taking inspiration from the previous design shown.
So here we came up with 4 main ideas. We can see we have the wire mesh design, which we took inspiration from the LRV. We have a flexible arm design, which we took inspiration from the Mars rovers. We have a hoop design, which we took inspiration from one of the scrapped LRV wheel designs. And then we have a hollow web design, which we took inspiration from one of our patents. And if we move over to the next slide, we have a second iteration of the flex arms, and we have an isometric and underload sketch of the wire mesh designs.
All right, thank you for listening. Any questions?
Really nice job again, guys. That was awesome. I do have to ask Dylan where he got his background.
I got it from the YouTube, NASA HUNCH YouTube.
Really?
Yeah.
wow, it looks awesome. I need
Thank
a
you.
background like that instead of my basement room. Awesome.
It's better
That's
than my
really cool.
bedroom.
You look very professional, and you all did a really professional job as usual. It was well presented, and I loved your matrix, and your drawings were really good, and all that research. I never even heard of everything about those lunar wheels. That must have been hours and hours of research that you did on that. So great job as usual.
Thank
I
you.
don't know if Glenn and is Glenn here?
I got cut off a little bit. Gene, do you have some comments? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted.
Sorry, again, I like the amount of work that is shown in all these presentations. You can see that you guys did your research and did it well. You picked out the main things and you come up with ideas. Can you go back to your what do you got? The weighting scale there again? Oh, right there. Again, this was really nice. It's having the ability to see this, having something on the side kind of telling you why you picked certain things, and you did address that in your talk, was good. And this is something to really get the meat into why you go a certain way. Can you go to the next slide? And so how you that being able to see that, and then going here was really nice path, being able to see why you chose the things you did here. I'm very curious to see what your next steps are. What did you guys have? Well, what are your next things going to be?
So we're going to expand on these like preliminary sketches we have here and decide on one or maybe two and really hone in on those and take those further.
Okay. That sounds exactly where you should be going in this. Look forward to your testing of these projects also.
Mm-hmm. How are you going to test it?
So actually at the school, we have this like collapsible scooter that we can theoretically be able to attach our own wheel to and test it that way. And then when I was researching the LRV, how they tested their wheels was they just had it directly driven on like a fake track to see how it would withstand hitting rocks and things like that. I mean, we obviously can't create our own vacuum and have a track that it runs on, but we can theoretically do something similar to make sure that the wheel is able to sustain its 300-mile lifespan.
Mm-hmm. Do you, Dylan and team, do you see Glenn's background? That's Glenn, tell them about that background you have.
So that's the testing area at Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California. They are, let's see, we can get out of the way. So that's one of the rovers that they're testing the day that I was there. So they're just having it drive up the oh, stop sharing and you can see better. How's that? All right, so there, maybe you can see that a little bit better.
Yeah.
But so that's you can see that they've got one of their test rovers going up and down a little bit there. So it was just something cool to see. So, and you mentioned that you have a collapsible scooter. What size wheels are on it right now?
So it's in this room. If I can go get it, we haven't looked at that a whole lot just because we've been really focusing on the research and we wanted to pick a design before we really compared the stuff. But I can go get it if you'd like to see it.
No, that's okay. I was just curious that part of the reason why we're going with an 18-inch diameter wheel is so that it can handle large rocks and bumps and things like that. And I think that if we came up with an electric scooter that could go around out in sand dunes and all kinds of stuff, that people would want that on Earth as well, not just on the moon. So I think that there's some great opportunities here as you guys explore with your wheels and what kind of things it can do. So I'm very excited about it. I like your ideas and I like the sketches that you've got. I think you guys have some great ideas for to be able to try out. So excellent job, team.
Yeah, your sketches were amazing. Actually, whoever did that took a lot of time and the detail in those sketches. And I couldn't read the descriptions, but I'm sure they were amazing too. So really great job. Do you have any questions for us?
Yeah, actually. So Glenn, when you were mentioning the 18-inch diameter, I was just wondering about, the 10-inch width. A lot of the past designs with rovers, they're very wide and square, and that's not very good for a two-wheel design. A lot of Earth scooters are like very narrow, rounded for, turn radius and things like that. So for our own design, I was wondering, do we want something that's, that up to that 10-inch limit, or should we look at something that's narrower and rounded and things like that?
So the 10 inches was to give people an option of how wide they wanted to make it. I think if you look around, you'll see that it depends. There are some vehicles that have a wider wheel, and that allows them to go kind of like a balloon tire, allows them to go in those softer surfaces. But it's not a requirement. If you find that you think that, hey, we only want a 3-inch or some other thing, I am perfectly fine with that. That is something for you to decide on. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if when it snows in Maryland there, if you want to try it out in the snow there. I don't know how similar snow would be to lunar regolith, but
I would think it would have some similarities, right? And it depends on how dense your snow is on that particular day.
Yeah.
But I don't know. What do you think, Gene?
I don't know.
That's as good of an answer as we can give sometimes.
Sorry. And that's a lot for me to say that.
Yeah, actually, I was in Connecticut last week on the beach, and I was looking at the sand because, of course, I'm thinking about lunar regolith, right? And what I noticed, and I even brought some sand back with me, is that the shells were decomposed, and so the shells, when they break up into these tiny little pieces, they're like sharp, and so I thought, oh my goodness, I had never seen so many shells broken up on the beach before. I'm used to the New Jersey shore, which is a fine sand, but this Connecticut was full of broken shells. Half the sand was broken up little shells into little pieces. And I thought, oh, that might be something. I didn't think about the wheels. I actually thought about the bricks on that one.
No, that's a great observation, Flo. And I bet you that the sand there would be a better simulant than some of the other sands. I mean, like the one you're talking about in New Jersey, I bet it's a lot more rounded. And so it's not as good of a simulant as what you were seeing. Good thinking, Flo.
Well, you guys did a great job thinking of all those wheels too. I really appreciate that. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, actually,
Skylight and Dylan. Go ahead, Dylan.
I have one last question. So when we were looking at the Lunicod rovers, the motor was housed inside the hub. And I know the actual design of the scooter itself isn't our realm here. We're just focusing on the wheels. But with that 1/2-inch axle size that we're set to, does that mean that where the motor's being held, we should just not worry about it all and just focus on that 1/2-inch?
That's right. I suspect that we will probably do the same kind of thing, putting the motor into the wheel hub itself. However, your design of the wheel is something that I just wanted you to concentrate on. I think it'd be awfully complicated and expensive to find to have everybody put motors in these things. So just concentrate on the wheel for now. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
And one final comment, your prototype can be made out of any material that is kind of similar to what you want, but you can have NASA advise them to do as expensive as you want. Yours should be as cheap as they want, but NASA, $1.2 million a pound is the reason why you can do that. Does that make sense? Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all that work.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
the feedback.
Yep.
Good thinking, team.
Good job.
All right, we have one more team, and it's the Insect Nanolab.
Glenn, did you catch the insects being on the Great British Bake Off this week?
I did not, but I'm gonna check it out.
Oh no!
Well, it's interesting because one of my teachers out here, he had lived in Africa for a while and was telling me about all the different bugs he had eaten while he was in Africa. And, you know, a lot of them were fried up in a pan and things like that. But it was interesting. He didn't know where they had gotten them from. So I think that they had captured them in the wild and then made it to the plate somehow. So I thought that was pretty exciting.
Well, here's our wonderful Insect Nanolab team. Introduce yourselves, and when you talk, you have to. What was the best way? Do you think move the computer instead of moving yourself, because you have to
Point the computer at yourself.
Point the computer.
So you're
at
the only one
yourself.
on the screen, basically.
Awesome. Okay.
I will start the presentation.
Yes, we see it.
Hello, we are the Insect Nanolab. I'm Adam Conley.
I'm Josiah Lang.
I'm Tyler Burt.
So for a bit of information, astronauts are in danger when they go to space. Radiation, decompression sickness, and muscle and bone atrophy are a problem for astronauts, and their lack of fresh food sources, which can lead to a lack of proper nutrition. Insects can provide some of the necessary nutrition, as well as be experimented on to see the effects of radiation, decompression sickness, and the atrophy.
NASA is interested in the observation of insects in a microgravity and irradiated environment because they need to research the long-term effects of space travel on humans. NASA needs a device to assist in the research of insects in space. If humans were to be used for this research instead of insects, they would be exposed to many threats. Insects also have a much shorter lifespan than humans, which means that researchers are able to study long-term effects of problems such as radiation and atrophy over a shorter time period. Another problem is that fruits and vegetables only last 2 to 3 days in space, so NASA needs a way to keep fresh foods for longer periods of time. The trip to Mars takes 7 months, so most stored foods won't last the mission. Farming plants is one solution to getting fresh food in space. However, astronauts need nutrients that plants cannot provide, such as the B12 and D3 vitamins, omega-3 fatty acids, and iron. Insects can provide a long-term food source for astronauts on the ISS and on future space travel missions, providing fiber, vitamins, minerals, and proteins. NASA needs a device to host experiments for insects in space in order to learn more about how to protect astronauts from the threats of space and to research ways to provide fresh food for longer missions.
Okay. Insects are very nutritious, containing many vitamins, minerals, and fibers that are unique to insects, and they're very space efficient, cheap. What? Space efficient, cheap, and yeah.
So there is 60 times more radiation in space than on Earth, and it's slightly different. Spacesuits, only being 1/4 of a gram per centimeter squared thick, don't protect as well as the space station at 15 grams per centimeter thick against radiation. Astronauts also have to spend hours preparing for an extravehicular activity by slowly decompressing the ISS and breathing 100% oxygen in order to combat decompression sickness. Astronauts also lose around 20% muscle mass after only 15 days, and they lose around 2% of their bone mass per month. So this strength loss can be terrible. If there's an emergency or something, they'll need that strength.
So for some of our patents, one of them was a cricket habitat and retail receptacle, which is essentially a cardboard-esque box with a viewing window so that you can see the insects inside while allowing them a space to crawl around and live their normal lives. And it has a food source inside of it. And the box is made of material that is lightweight and will absorb the excess moisture.
Oh, there we go. Oh, okay. Another one of our patents is a nanolab small habitat that is most notable for its ability to separate dead and living insects through positive and negative stimulants, being able to push and pull the insects around the habitat. Similar solutions. Baylor University built a butterfly nanolab that was sent up to space to observe the behavior of the butterflies, such as their mating habits, larval growth speed, their survival, and others. These were compared with a control group that was left on Earth. Ants were also sent into space to experiment the effects of microgravity and how they would explore and maneuver in space. So they would help each other to stay balanced and on the walls to allow them to explore different areas that opened every 25 minutes. And this also had ventilation and a food and water source for it to be habitable. Another nanolab that was on the ISS was the fruit fly nanolab, one of the smallest nanolabs. But the downside to this is that it required more attention from astronauts. They had to insert a little food tray, if you could see that. They had to slot it in, called a cassette. And that would provide a food-like substance that gave the fruit flies other nutrients. And then we have the fungus nanolab, which was one of last year's HUNCH nanolabs. And so it was in a nanolab capsule that contained living organisms and had the modular capability to study different experiments. On the left is one of the finalists nanolabs, and on the right is the nanolab from Glenelg's group from last year.
In this matrix, we ranked some of these previous designs with our specifications, and we decided that the fungus nanolab and the butterflies in space were the most similar to our needs.
Our design specifications are the nanolab needs to sustain at least 5 or more insects of the same species, no stinging or biting type insects like bees or wasps, and they need to provide enough space for at least one generation. And the nanolab had to survive the trip to space. And it says to keep the insects alive for about 30 days, although taking time in to like travel to the launch pad, go up and all that, it's more around 40 days, I'd say. So parameters for that requires sources of food and water. Design should be modular for other investigations or experiments, and allows for sensors and camera views to be mounted to observe the insects better. And the chamber should separate the insects by generation, and it must all fit in a 10 by 10 by 20 centimeter nanolab.
In this matrix, we ranked some of the designs that we created, some of the concepts that we created with our specifications. We determined that the door lab was most similar to our needs. We decided to go with utility over cost, choosing modularity, habitability, and visibility over things like weight. So we decided to pursue the door lab because it has good modularity with a removable panel near the sensors. It's got good visibility because all of the interior walls are transparent, It's got decent autonomy because the only interaction necessary is to lock the doors in order to fully separate the insect generations. And it's lightweight because there's no redundant parts and it's got plenty of open space. It's not complex at all, and it's the only design that we've come up with that effectively separates the generations of insects.
Are there any questions?
Good job, team. Go up a slide. Okay, tell me a little bit more about this. You're talking about using these doors to separate, which I think is good. But I'm not sure how many insects are you planning to fly up? What are you thinking about for that?
So within our specifications, it was at least 5 insects, giving some room for them to breed enough offspring, and that's what we're trying to separate is the initial group from their offspring.
I see. Okay, so you're planning to send up like 4 or 5 adults, and then hope that they'll lay some eggs that will then be able to grow. Is that part of what you're thinking?
Yes, that's the design behind this, or that's the idea behind this design.
Okay, and I think those are some neat ideas. Now I see that you also you've got compressed air and water. Tell me a little bit about those ideas.
So those are basically just space holders for some ideas, because we aren't truly sure what we would do. The air is for during transportation. We wouldn't know how much air would be needed or how much water would be needed to sustain the insects. And that's something we need to figure out during the testing phase.
I see. And tell me about what kind of testing you're thinking of doing beforehand.
So beforehand, we would test many different kinds of insects because we're not sure what what types of insects NASA would use this with. So we would need to test many, many different kinds of insects and learn things like their water and air consumption, their food consumption, and how much space they would need to effectively reproduce.
Okay, those are all great ideas. Do you have thoughts on which?
Nope.
We lost him there.
Well, I can speak up while he's bounced off here. But I really liked what you guys did with looking at the research. Oh, Glenn's back.
It's okay. Go ahead, Gene.
Oh, I was just complimenting him. I really like the research in here, and the idea that they're using some of the ideas from that research specifically, like in this model, to move forward and investigate further into what other people have already done. That's a good model for projects. So very nice. But go ahead with Glenn with what you were saying.
I got cut off. So did you guys have an idea of what kind of bugs you wanted to start with for what you might kind of model as part of this?
I initially thought that crickets or some sort of grub would be the best to put into this because crickets are extremely nutritious and
they're yummy. So
and Glenn's eating them now.
Yeah, we saw.
Okay, well that sounds great. Flo, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I like that you are concentrating on making it generic. That is the first team I have heard that says, oh, we're going to try different insects, because this is a generic nanolab, and that leads to the problem of the air and water. Every species will probably need a different amount of water, a different amount of air. So when you keep that as a variable, that's the way to to go. I was interested in your research. I thought you did a great job in your research, and so we have sent up a lot of things. Yours is different because it has to be autonomous. So an astronaut just plugs it in and leaves it alone. These other ones, you could see like they slid in the food or whatever. Yours can't. Yours is to be completely autonomous. That students from 5th grade or even lower up to researchers will be able to kind of plug and play. They want to see a specific thing about an insect, and they can, nanoracks can send them their generic insect nanolab, and they can send it back with whatever insects and stuff they want in there, which is important. I like the one comment that said this, it was in the beginning where you had that cardboard box of I think it was butterflies, that the sides absorb the waste. That's going to be a problem. We can't have the waste of the insects floating around. I thought that was really cool that they had a lining inside the box that could absorb the waste. And that I was always worried about the waste floating around with the insects, but that's kind of a simple solution to that. Just have something absorb the waste from the insects, and maybe even the other issue would be the dead insects. If one dies, that it would float around and block the camera. But maybe you can go one step further and not just absorb like the waste of the insects, but any waste in that. And the other issue would be the food. Maybe some food would get floating around. So developing some material that lines it, that would absorb all these things floating around, that would solve a lot of issues, I think. And so that's one of the important things about doing research. You come up with creative ideas that maybe, that was a little part of their project, but it can become a very important part in your project because you have different constraints. So I really appreciated your work that you did on looking up all those different types and learning from each of them. And your sketch here looks pretty awesome that you have already developed. And now what you need to do is kind of test out. And I like your attitude towards the testing. You're going to test different insects and different stuff. So thank you so much. I'm excited about what your final product will look like in the end. It's awesome job.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions for us?
We do actually have questions. So first of all, we would like to know if you guys would prefer us to prioritize utility or cost, because we as the engineering team would of course like to build something that works well, but NASA would probably also want something that's very cheap to send up.
Utility is the more important thing there, I think.
I agree.
We can help with the cost later on. First, show us your ideas. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right. So your cost should be minimum, but NASA's cost, the sky's the limit. All right, because and it won't even be NASA's cost, it will be nanoracks. So
well, and we're going to try to minimize. So part of our goal is to have a nano rack that any teacher could purchase for their class and be able to assemble it together, assemble it for their activity. And so, but the first thing is they have to have the kind of options that make them interested. And so that's where your utility and your ideas are the first thing that we want to be concentrating on. And so sometimes your very first ideas are great ideas, but it takes a little while to get them down to the simplicity or the cheap. And we can help with that as we go. Okay.
Mhm. And I liked how you, the insects on the PowerPoints that Glenn has shown you is all about eating them. And Glenn even said he would eat them if you eat them first. But the researchers that sent up the fruit flies and the spiders and the butterflies, they weren't planning on eating it. There are other important reasons why the researcher is going to put insects in that lab. And that's an important thing for you to realize too.
That's right. And so we're not trying to concentrate on the eating of the insects. That's much later down the road. Actually, you guys brought up some very good reasons that we are studying the bugs because they're going to help us understand ourselves as well. You mentioned the radiation, the zero gravity, and all of those things. Those are the same kind of things that we are interested in for the bugs. So I think you guys seem to have a good handle on what we are trying to get to first. So good job with that.
Yeah, that's important. Yeah, thank you so much. Any other questions? Yes.
That's it for us. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great job.
You guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, I think I don't think, let's see, I'm coming on video. There we go. That's all of our groups from Glenelg.
Did they miss their lunch?
No, they're just 5 minutes in. We're just 5 minutes in.
Good.
Yep, we're just starting lunch here now.
Oh, awesome. Well, they did an amazing job. That was so wonderful to see.
So yeah, I got your dates there. I just went through the dates for the November and December preliminary design reviews and stuff of that nature. So
awesome. And did the kids go online and do their talent authorization?
So we did all the online part now. Now it's just that the parent side. Yeah. So I have about, I don't know, half or 3/4. And once I get all of them, I'll scan them over to you.
Hey, Ray, quick question for you. Did your students use the video that we created for the research?
So we looked at your video that you did. Yeah, I looked at that with them as well.
Was it helpful? And I'm very serious about this, as I respect you as a teacher and I want to know.
Yeah, I mean, like what I've seen over the years past, right? I mean, some people just miss that research part. And like really what it did too is like, I'm telling them to do it, but then it's also coming from another person. It's now, it's not just me saying it, it's another person reiterating the importance of it.
Okay.
I've always kind of done the research through Project Lead the Way, the ED, engineering design development. So it's kind of coined that, like that problem statement, big slide, that's part of it. Like I'm always like rule of six, not a lot of words, except for that one spot. I've always went that way, but I've sat in some of the preliminary design reviews as you guys have, and they're like, oh, you missed something. And so I think, I'm hoping like November, December, we don't have as many of those, but we may have one or two. Some of the kids are literally, and I explained to these guys, they're doing this as an after school club or solo, or right, they're not getting as much advising. So that I think that this part of really hounding the research and looking at that for them should help, because yeah, I mean, it just finds some of the little things like the collapsible mirror group. They met with Rob Tate and Dr. Gold about a month ago, I think.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
And they spent an hour and a half just going through stuff with him and seeing the problems. You're trying to reel him back into some of the hunch stuff, never.
Yeah. But I'm glad to hear that Rob's still involved. That's terrific.
Yeah, no, he's never given up. And he mentors Glenelg on the robotics.
Yeah, so we chat with him on the robotics side, but he was willing to meet with these guys. I mean, it was a good hour that they met the one day. So
it really
that's
was
terrific.
helpful.
I'm so glad to hear that.
No, I mean, the research part is, I mean, it's one of the biggest things. I mean, obviously the testing and getting the data is one of the next biggest hurdles for all the kids. But like, if they do good enough research and heavy enough research, it makes the testing in the buildup of something a little bit easier because you've
Yeah.
eliminated some things, you know, and that's the whole point of doing the research side.
My
yeah.
goal with that was to try to make it as short as possible without without missing anything. So if you have any suggestions, please email me and I will for future versions of that video.
Yeah, we'll look through it again here now, next class and see, like, we'll like with the group now that they've went through this, like, see, do they want other things based on what you guys have fed back, you given feedback. Oh, I missed that, but they mentioned it here. Maybe we need to include it there or something too. Definitely.
Okay, cool.
And would it be
Jean.
all right if Jean does another video and includes some of what, because your kids, I think they got it, hit it out of the ballpark. as
Yeah,
far
no,
as-
like
They definitely did.
that,
Yeah.
and just show like examples, things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's what I needed and we didn't have.
Right.
So,
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Okay. Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna get going here. I'll see
Yep.
you guys soon, I hope.
Have a great lunch. Thank you so
Bye,
much.
everybody.
Everyone, thank you so much. Oh, I love Dylan's
Bye,
background.
Dylan.
He looks so professional. The kids look so professional when they do this. They do a great job. Thank you.
All right. See you guys.
Okay, bye-bye. Bye, Ray.